The bank was buzzing with the same sterile energy it always had. Neat desks, polished floors, and suits that spoke in rehearsed tones. No one looked twice when the woman in the beige hoodie and black cap walked in. At least, not at first. She moved with a quiet confidence, her arms crossed, her eyes scanning every detail as if she were taking mental notes. Her hoodie was plain, her sneakers clean but worn, and her presence slightly out of place in a room of stiff collars and blinking monitors. She walked up to the front counter where a well-dressed woman behind a laptop barely looked up. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, voice clipped, eyes already drifting back to the screen. "I need to open an account," the woman in the hoodie said, her tone calm, deliberate. The woman at the desk hesitated for a second too long. Her eyes flicked over the hoodie, the cap, the dark skin. "We're only accepting new clients by appointment," she said, though a man in a suit had just been led to a desk without any fuss. The hoodie-wearing woman folded her arms tighter. "I didn't see that sign posted anywhere." "It's internal policy," the bank worker said, her voice a shade more rigid. From behind her, a few other employees glanced over, sensing the temperature shift. One or two whispered. Another tapped on his laptop as if to tune out the conversation. The woman in the hoodie didn't move. She tilted her head slightly. "Funny, because I know your policy. In fact, I know every line of it." The bank employee frowned. "Ma'am, I'll have to ask you to lower your voice." "I haven't raised it yet," the woman replied, still calm, but with an edge in her tone. "I'm just asking to be treated like the man who walked in 2 minutes ago." Behind them, more eyes turned. The hum of keystrokes slowed. An assistant manager started making his way over. The woman in the hoodie didn't blink. She wasn't here to cause a scene, but she knew one was already forming, and part of her wanted it to. Because some truths didn't surface in silence. They had to be pulled out under the harsh lights, where everyone could see. The assistant manager arrived with a forced smile. "Is there a problem here?" The bank employee jumped in. "She's refusing to make an appointment." "I've already explained. I don't need an appointment," the woman said, cutting her off. "What I need is fairness. I walked in here with the same intention as that man over there." She pointed, "and I got stonewalled before I even finished a sentence."
The assistant manager's smile faltered.
"Maybe we can take this conversation into my office."
She shook her head. "No,
"We're having it right here."
because I've been here before.
"I've been to this exact desk before."
Dressed different, sure.
"But I've seen how your team works. And today, I wanted to see what it felt like to walk in here not as a name, not as a title, but just as a person."
Sie längste rappet around the room like smoke. The air changed.
The workers at the desks stopped pretending to type. Customers turned their heads, some wide-eyed, others watching carefully. The woman behind the laptop froze, suddenly unsure. "And?" the assistant manager asked, voice quieter now. "What did you find?" "I found exactly what I expected," she replied. "Prejudice wrapped in professionalism, courtesy reserved for the comfortable." Then she stepped back and unzipped her hoodie halfway. Underneath it, a fine silk blouse showed just for a second, elegant, expensive. Her wrist, once covered, now bore a watch few could afford without generational wealth. She didn't flaunt it, just revealed enough to make a point. "You don't know me," she said, "but you will." A hush spread. Someone at a desk mouthed her name. The assistant manager's expression shifted, recognition creeping in, dread following close behind. "I'm Zora Timberlake," she said, her voice finally rising. "Majority owner of Monarch Financial. And today was your test." Gasps followed. A phone slipped from someone's hand and clattered on a desk. The woman behind the laptop turned pale. Zora looked around the room. "And you failed." But she didn't say it with anger. Her voice was steady, almost mournful. She wasn't here for vengeance. She was here for revelation. Because no policy reform, no seminar, no corporate PR campaign could match the power of standing in front of someone who thought you were beneath them, and showing them exactly who you were. The assistant manager tried to speak. "Ms. Timberlake, if we had known." "That's the point," she cut in. "You weren't supposed to know. You were supposed to treat every person with the same respect I get in a tailored suit. And you didn't." Phones began to buzz. Word spread faster than fire. Employees stood in awkward silence. One or two tried to quietly leave the room, but Zora wasn't finished. She turned back to the woman who had first spoken to her. "What's your name?" The woman stammered. "Eliza." "Eliza," Zora repeated. "You judged me before I said 3 words. You lied about a policy that doesn't exist." You assumed I didn't belong here. Eliza's lips quivered.
I didn't mean, you did. And that's the problem.
Behind Zora, the digital screens that displayed interest rates and savings plans felt suddenly irrelevant. Real numbers were being calculated now. The cost of bias, the price of presumption. And this was only the beginning. Zora stood tall in the center of the bank lobby. The silence around her wasn't just awkward anymore. It was charged. The kind of silence that hangs in the air just before something breaks open. No one had moved since she said her name.
Zora Timberlake, majority owner, Monarch Financial.
3 facts that didn't match the hoodie, the cap, or the crossed arms they had dismissed just minutes ago. Let me make something clear, Zora said, turning slowly to face the entire room. This isn't about shaming one person. This is about exposing a system that lets people like Eliza act this way without even realizing they're doing it. Eliza opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no words.
Not now.
Zora pointed to a man near the back. You let a customer through without hesitation.
You smiled,
Offered him coffee. But when I stepped forward, your whole demeanor changed.
Why?
He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. You thought wrong, Zora said, not cruelly, just truthfully. And I came here today to show you what that looks like. Her words landed like quiet thunder, the kind that shakes a room without needing to shout. From the entrance, someone with a camera phone had started filming. Another whispered to a colleague, "Is this really happening?"
It was.
Zora stepped closer to the front desk. "Let me tell you something about this bank," she said. "I bought my first shares when I was 29. Silent investor. Kept my name out of everything. Watched the numbers, watched the growth. But more importantly, I watched how people were treated." She paced slowly, letting her words sink in. "I'd hear about customer complaints, especially from people who looked like me. I'd read the reports. Then I'd walk in, dressed for success, and suddenly everyone's the friendliest banker in the city." Someone near the corner of the room coughed.
Zora stopped.
Her eyes landed on a young teller, maybe new, maybe still hopeful.
She walked over to him. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus," he said, nervous. "Marcus.
When I walked in earlier, did you notice anything?"
He nodded slowly. "You looked uncomfortable.
Like you expected something to go wrong." Zora smiled faintly.
I did." Marcus looked down.
"I wanted to say something, but I didn't think it was my place."
"It always is," she said.
"Silence helps no one but the ones in power. And the power in this room?"
"It's shifting."
At that, she turned toward the assistant manager again. "Where's your branch manager?" He's out today," the assistant manager said, visibly sweating now. "Of course he is," Zora murmured, then looked to the others. "But I won't wait for him. Change doesn't wait. It starts right here." She walked back to the center of the room. "Effective immediately, this branch is under audit. Every customer interaction, every hiring decision, every policy enforcement. I'll be bringing in an independent team to observe and report."
Gasps echoed again.
"I'll be sitting in on staff meetings.
Il be vetting security footage.
And I'll be speaking with clients who were turned away, ignored, or mishandled." Then she turned to Eliza once more. "You will not be fired today. That would be too easy."
Eliza blinked. "What?"
"You're going to stay. You're going to learn. You're going to face what you've done, not just to me, but to anyone who walked in here and was dismissed without cause." Eliza looked like she might cry, but Zora didn't flinch. "This isn't punishment," Zora said. "It's responsibility." And then, for the first time since the reveal, someone clapped.
Just one. Then another joined. And another.
It wasn't a full standing ovation, but it was a start. A flicker of courage from people who'd stayed quiet for too long. Zora turned toward the camera that was still rolling.
"You can post that.
The world needs to see it." She faced the room one final time. "You don't have to be in a position of power to make change.
But if you are, and you don't,
then you're part of the problem." She walked toward the door but stopped just before leaving. "To anyone in this room who's ever felt small," she said without turning around, "remember, the ones trying to keep you down are usually the most afraid of your rise." Then she stepped out into the daylight, hoodie still zipped, cap still low. But now, everyone knew exactly who she was. The doors of the bank slid shut behind her with a soft mechanical hiss, but the echo of Zora's words kept ringing inside. Outside, the world moved as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, people scrolled through their phone, and the sun kept shining as usual. But something had changed. Inside the glass and steel branch of Monarch Financial, silence had bloomed into reckoning. Zora didn't smile as she walked down the steps.
She didn't need to. She hadn't come for applause.
Her steps were steady, firm, and measured.
Not angry, not smug, just purposeful.
Behind her, faces peered out the windows.
Some pressed closer.
Others retreated into back rooms. But they all knew the same truth now. The person they had ignored, dismissed, or misjudged wasn't just a customer. They had treated the owner of the bank like a problem. By the time she reached the corner, her phone buzzed.
Then again, and again, messages flooded in.
Zora, was that you at Midtown branch? It's all over social media. We need a response ASAP.
The board wants to meet.
Do we confirm or deny your visit? Please call me before press finds out. She slid her phone back in her pocket. The world could wait a few more minutes.
She needed to breathe.
Across the street was a coffee shop she used to frequent back when she was just another name in the system. She stepped inside, ordered the same drink she always had, plain black, no sugar, no cream, and sat at a window seat. As the cup warmed her hands, she watched the bank from afar. Not the building, but the people inside it. She wondered what they were thinking now, wondered if they were re-watching the footage, hearing her voice in a new way. And then, she remembered her first time in that bank, years ago before she bought in, dressed in business attire, polished resume, clear goals. But still, she had been told to wait, to come back later. That someone else had a more urgent appointment. It was the same dance every time, until she changed the steps. Zora took a deep breath. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a beginning. Back in the branch, Marcus, the young teller, stood frozen at his desk. He was replaying her words in his mind. Silence helps no one but the ones in power. He looked around the room. The usual calm of professionalism had been replaced by raw, exposed tension. Eliza sat still, blinking fast, her hands trembling slightly on the keyboard she no longer touched. The assistant manager whispered into his phone, pacing near the copier, clearly giving a damage report. But Marcus was thinking of something else. A customer he hadn't spoken up for. A woman last week who had left angry and humiliated.
He hadn't intervened. Until now.
He stood up, walked over to Eliza's desk and said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" Eliza looked up, eyes wary. "I've seen how you handle people," he said. "I didn't say anything before."
But I should've. She frowned.
"What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying, we've got work to do."
All of us.
Behind them, other staff members began murmuring. Someone mentioned forming a group discussion. Another brought up training sessions they always skipped. A shift was beginning, not just because they had been caught, but because they had been seen. Zora's presence had cracked the glass. Now it was up to them to walk through it. Back at the coffee shop, Zora's phone rang again. This time, it was a familiar name, Brenda, the head of public relations. Zora answered. "Zora," Brenda said, half out of breath, "the video's already past 1 million views. News outlets are picking it up. Everyone's calling it the hoodie reveal." Zora chuckled dryly. "That's dramatic. You know how media is. But listen, this could be a PR nightmare or a transformation moment. Which direction do you want to go?" Zora looked out the window again.
"We go forward. We stop hiding.
No fake apologies.
No vague statements. I'll make a speech." Brenda hesitated. "Are you sure?"
"I didn't do this for the press," Zora said. "But now that the world is watching, we give them something real."
Brenda exhaled. "Okay, I'll set it up.
You'll have every major network watching." Zora hung up and sipped her coffee. The world would soon know the full story. But this wasn't about a viral video or headlines. It was about legacy, about making sure that no one who walked into a Monarch branch ever felt invisible again. And yet, even as she sat there, calm and collected, she knew this was only the middle of the battle.
There would be backlash.
There would be pushback from those who preferred the quiet comfort of bias disguised as policy.
But she was ready. Back inside the bank, the Staff gathered.
Marcus had pulled up internal policy documents on his laptop. A few people leaned in to read. Eliza, still shaken, finally stood and asked, "Where do we even begin?" Marcus answered, with truth. One by one, they began listing questions, concerns, and confessions. Some talked about things they had seen but ignored. Others asked for help understanding how to be better. The walls that once kept people separate, titles, roles, attitudes, began to crack just a little more. It was messy,
uncomfortable, but real.
And somewhere, not far away, Zora sat quietly, watching change take its first breath. 3 days later, Zora Timberlake stood behind a sleek podium framed by towering glass windows.
Cameras flashed.
Microphones leaned in. Reporters buzzed with anticipation. Behind her, the Monarch Financial logo gleamed like it always had, but today, it meant something different.
She adjusted the mic. No notes.
No teleprompter.
Just truth.
When I walked into that branch earlier this week, I wasn't there as your CEO. I wasn't there as an owner. I was there as a customer. Just like the millions of people we serve.
She paused, and I was judged.
The silence in the press room mirrored the one that had filled the bank lobby on that fateful day. Zora continued, "What happened to me wasn't new.
It wasn't shocking, but it was necessary.
Necessary for people to see what bias looks like in real time. Necessary for this company to take a hard look in the mirror." Behind her, a large screen lit up with the words, "Equity, transparency, accountability." "These aren't slogans," she said, turning briefly to gesture at them.
"They're commitments."
Starting today, Monarch Financial is undergoing a full-scale policy reform.
Not for optics.
Not for damage control,
but because it's long overdue.
Cameras clicked faster now. Reporters whispered excitedly.
Zora took a breath.
Every employee, from the executive suite to the front desk, will go through bias and empathy training. We'll be working with third-party equity consultants. And yes, our hiring practices are being rebuilt from the ground up. She leaned in slightly. But let me be clear. This is not a temporary project. This is a culture shift. Because the next Zora who walks into a branch in a hoodie shouldn't need to own the company just to be treated with respect.
Applause erupted.
Not the kind manufactured for publicity, but the kind that came from something real. Even some of the press stood. After the speech, Zora walked off the stage with quiet confidence.
Brenda approached her, eyes wide.
"You just rewrote the rulebook." Zora shrugged slightly.
"Good. The old one was broken."
Meanwhile, at the Midtown branch, something strange was happening.
Change.
Marcus now led short morning meetings called 10 at 10, 10 minutes at 10 where staff gathered to share reflections, listen to customer feedback, and check each other without defensiveness. It was awkward at first, but then, it became normal. Eliza sat in the corner of one such meeting.
Not leading, just listening.
She had apologized, publicly and personally. Zora hadn't demanded it. She'd simply told her, "Start with truth."
"Sie wer itakas you."
And truth had taken Eliza somewhere unexpected. Humility. "I didn't realize how much I wasn't seeing," Eliza admitted one morning. "I thought I was being professional, but I was being selective. And selective service is discrimination, dressed in a blazer."
No one clapped. No one had to.
Growth isn't a performance. It's a process. At the corporate office, Zora launched a program called Hoodies Welcome. It wasn't about fashion. It was about presence. It was about dismantling the unspoken dress codes that came with judgment. Soon, branches around the country joined in. Staff wore hoodies on Fridays. Signs were posted. "Your appearance will never outweigh your worth." Customers noticed. So did the world. News outlets that once asked was she too aggressive now ran headlines like, "CEO sets new standard for corporate accountability." Zora Timberlake isn't just changing her bank. She's changing the culture from silence to systems. How one woman's walk-in sparked a movement, but Zora didn't chase headlines.
She chased impact.
Late one night, long after interviews had ended and the buzz had softened, Zora returned to that same Midtown branch. She walked in quietly.
No camera.
No entourage.
Marcus looked up and smiled.
"MS. Timberlake."
"Zora," she corrected gently.
He nodded.
"We've been expecting you."
She smiled and approached the counter. "Thought I'd open a new account. For a scholarship fund.
"I want to name it after someone." Marcus raised an eyebrow.
"Who?"
Zora looked around the now renovated branch. New art, open design, diverse staff. "Everyone who ever sat in a chair and felt invisible," she said. "Let's make sure they're seen."
He nodded again, softer this time. "We will."
As Marcus began the paperwork, Zora leaned back and took it all in. Not the success, not the recognition, but the quiet power of system shifting. She knew there would always be more work to do. Bias doesn't vanish overnight. Equity isn't a single policy, it's a practice. But she had started the work, and others had picked up the tools. Outside, the city pulsed on. But inside Monarch Financial, something was different now. Not perfect, not fixed,
Just honest.
And that, Zora knew, was a beginning worth fighting for.
Guys, if you like the story, then click the subscribe button and also like and share the video.
Thanks.